So I've been playing The Legend of Dragoon. After the rather unexpected explosion that was Final Fantasy VII, a lot of other companies wanted a piece of that sweet JRPG pie. And Sony, apparently not having made enough off of the PS1 sales cost by FF7 alone, decided to make a JRPG of their very own. They wanted a game that would be bigger and better, but mostly just bigger than Final Fantasy VII. So that's exactly what they made, and as a result, shit took about 3 whole fucking years to develop and wouldn't see the light of day until the year 2000, when the PS2 buzz was already hype as fuck. Still, it managed to sell alright despite that, and it also gained quite the fan following over the years, as I would come to find out with some rather ill-mannered comments on my original review. I fixed it now though, so don't you worry your puffy little nips. But yeah, a big fucking game needed a big fucking world. And in this case, it is the world of Endiness, which, according to Wikipedia, is a geographically diverse land, with each climate zone being home to a different nation. And as someone who has indeed played the game, I can confirm this to be true. You see, there's like this war going on because the nation of Serdio kinda has this asshole emperor who's using the power of dragons to take over the world, and at the same time, our hero Dart is on his way home from a failed revenge quest to kill the black monster who murder-killed his parents that one time. Being quite fond of surprises though, said evil emperor casually destroys Dart's hometown and kidnaps his love interest, and thusly Dart and his friends get ass deep into this war to such a degree that they're actually in way over their heads. I mean, somewhere along the line they uncover that they've inherited some ancient Dragoon warrior transforming powers, and that their little story will soon grow to be much bigger than just this stupid war that's going on. Basically, they end up opening a few cans of worms that they maybe shouldn't have opened, especially considering that they're already in as deep. Jokes. Now, despite what it might seem like, the story actually strays pretty fucking far from the box standard JRPG "I am the underdog and I'm going to kill God" bullshit you might be used to. I mean, it does use character archetypes, and there's certainly no mistaking that this is a JRPG made in the mid-90s, but it's the amount of shit going on at the same time that makes this story stand out from the crowd. And sure, it's not like it's standing on stilts or anything, but at least Dart's spiky hair raises a few millimeters above your average yobbo. There's just a lot going on, as there's plot twists aplenty, and also because this Legend of the D is bloody rich with lore, which it doesn't cock up by not explaining things properly. Thing is that Dart is certainly not the brightest boy, so everything more or less has to be laid out in front of him as the game continues. And while the writing is about as solid as what you might expect from a game from this era, being that it's a bit hit or miss, at the very least, no one are sick. As far as JRPGs go though, this is a pretty standard one from a gameplay standpoint. So once again, I'll skip the basics and only comment on what the game does to set itself apart. Like, I'm sure everyone would know what I'm talking about when I say that the game is random encounters, turn-based combat, and that there's a world map about which you can walk around and explore freely like it's none of your bit. What? Okay, so in terms of exploration, walking around towns and dungeons is literally just like every JRPG ever, but the world map on the other hand is essentially set on rails. You do actually walk on it like you would do normally, as it's not like a Final Fantasy Tactics game where your character will just slide across the screen down a line to the nearest town, but just why? Like, I don't dislike it, and usually the enemies on the world map are pretty weak compared to the enemies found in dungeons, meaning that you're better off grinding there anyway, but it does seem to take away from the freedom of just walking out into an area you're not supposed to, or being able to find some cheeky secrets at least somewhat. Thing is as well is that the game takes away certain sets of rails whenever it wants to. Luckily though, you don't actually have to grind all that much, thus making this kind of a moot point. Yeah, this is totally the rewritten version that is good. Just kill everything you come across and you should be fine. And the killing in question is done without odd concessions, so you know, all characters just kind of stand there on opposite sides like idiots, patiently awaiting their turn, as you have a bit of a fiddle with their menus down below, containing all of the expected options like attack, guard, Hitler, and the abilities to run and use items. The only things that really stand out here are these button prompt things called additions, the titular Dragoon transformations, and the fact that instead of magic, you use throwable items. So, yeah, let's go over what do. The additions are, like I just said, a type of QuickTime event not too dissimilar from how shit is in the Paper Mario games. After you choose to attack, a square will appear with another square slowly closing in on it. And once the two squares overlap and make baby, all you really need to do is press X and the attack shall commence. However, should you fail, then the attack will still land, but it'll do nowhere near the same amount of damage. In any case though, these additions will start out rather simple, with usually only 1 or 2 button presses, but as your character levels up, they'll learn stronger attacks, and stronger attacks means longer additions, and longer additions means that the enemy has the ability to counterattack, to which you have to respond by pressing circle. It's simple, easy to understand, and good golly fuck do I dig it. What it does is that it spices up the otherwise slower battles and adds some legit kinesthetical feedback to make shit all the more satisfying to play. The only real sort of kind of downside to it is the fact that the later iterations can get pretty fucking tricky, often lacking any type of general rhythm between the hits, making it solely about the visual cues and nothing else. It's a bit much for your muscle memory to take in, to be honest, especially when you take into consideration that each character has multiple additions to switch between as well. Luckily for you though, you can level these up individually, allowing you to cherry pick whichever ones work best and make those as powerful as possible. There are some level caps involved, sure, made to push you towards at least trying something different, but as a trade-off, the stronger they are, the longer they'll be, leaving you with much more chances of actually fucking it up somehow, thus never using them to their fullest potential anyway. Effectively making the shorter, weaker ones a possible better bet if you aren't too quick with the QuickTime events, and I fucking love that, as it shows that they took into account that not everything will necessarily work for everyone, but still giving those willing or able to dig a bit deeper a fuck of a whole lot more to mess around with. As the story goes on, all characters will eventually receive their respective Dragoon spirits, which allow them to transform into a Dragoon. These are the game's main selling point. They literally covered all promotional art with this shit, and well, I can't really blame them. I mean, they look kinda cool in a "I'm 12 years old and I like Yu-Gi-Oh! And Dragon Ball Z, only except I'm not 12 and I'm actually an adult" kinda way, and even though it's something I mostly grew out of in favor of more mature things, I still can't help but admit that the game does a pretty good fucking job of convincing you that these oversized winged armors are the coolest thing ever. And I guess the way that they affect the story is also quite interesting. Really putting the focus on characters in their turmoils and how they must overcome these, as well as some pretty neat backstory stuff and world building. Oh, and you can also use them in battle, which it's probably pretty important too. When in Dragoon form, all stats get a slight boost, and you get the option to either use magic or attack. Attacking in this state doesn't use additions of any kind, and instead requires you to press X whenever this arm thingy completes a circle. This can be pretty fucking hard to pull off, not gonna lie, but the amount of damage you do is so much higher than normal that it's still worth giving a shot regardless. And the Dragoon magic works like how magic does in most JRPGs, and that it costs MP, and that it's just kind of like this small tiny little cutscene showing off some fancy particle effects. There isn't really a whole lot of MP to go around though, so I often found myself not using it too much outside of boss battles, which isn't all that bad considering how long these bastards can take. If you do wish to just sit there and watch shit play out every 5 minutes, however, then it is totally possible to equip one of the many trinkets that'll make MP management a lot easier, but if you ask me, I'd say that the Dragoon stuff is a lot more like a type of limit break or summon move than something that's meant for general use. So, it's a good thing then that the magic outside of Dragoon form doesn't involve any MP at all. Instead of magic, you use throwable items that you find in chests or buy at stores. You can select these items from your battle menu, and once you do, you need to mash X to increase the damage what they do. And these are pretty fucking OP. They do insane amount of damage compared to physical attacks and even the fucking Dragoon stuff. As a way to remedy this though, they've capped the inventory so you're only able to carry about 30 something items, and the inventory is just way too small, honestly, especially because none of your attack items stack. Now, I will say that the problem isn't just down to the size of the inventory itself, but more so attributed to the game just not really being designed around it. What I mean with that is that despite the small size, you're still flooded with items. Almost every chest you find requires you to either use something or throw something away, even without knowing what's actually in there. And pretty much every dungeon has a full heal thingy, like a pool of healing water or some type of magic stone or whatever, so you never get to use your heaps of healing potions either. And yeah, sure, my playstyle is also partially to blame for this. You obviously don't have to stock up every time you reach a town, but by the time I got to Disc 3, I was finding chests left and right. So even if I wasn't hoarding so much, I still would have been swamped to shit regardless. Like I said, the game just isn't really built around the smaller inventory, which made it a much bigger nuisance than it ever had to be. Judging all of these elements separately though isn't gonna do them any justice, as it is in how things come together to make one thrilling D-related legend that makes this game worth playing. It's not quite as over-the-top as other JRPGs of the era, so characters end up coming across as somewhat subdued, but in a good way. Dart, for instance, isn't your stereotypical emo guy or hero man. He's just a boy on a mission who's been through some shit, and while he does reflect on this numerous times, it doesn't get him down to the point of dysfunction. This makes him relatable. I mean, I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say that most of you probably didn't have your parents violently murdered by the Black Monster, but it's the down-to-earth manner in which this is presented that makes you go, oh, yeah, okay. The same goes for all of the political turmoil that certainly takes more of a backseat when the villain Lloyd gets introduced, first being established as a bit of a badass only to then crush that by making him the most despicable dick ever. Isn't ever too complicated or bogged down by wacky jargon, funky foreign concepts, and needlessly emotional wank. Like, there's a bad emperor gone rogue, a malicious madman pulling the strings in all kinds of devious ways, and a fat sadist obese guy henchman. You know, stuff you can instantly see for what it is and per extension, roll with. It's good. And the art direction is too, passing over my Japanese animes with their flashy stylishness in favor of the dankest medieval settings this side of the Soul series and some pretty inventive Middle Eastern inspired architecture that mixes really well with it to create something that's pretty visually unique. The only thing I'd say that kinda bogs it down as a whole is the way that certain plot elements, like the war, are interchanged and suppressed, laying bare some pretty awkward pacing issues both plot-wise and in terms of gameplay. I'd say that Disc 2 is easily the worst offender here. You go from the city through the mountains to a town. Then you go from the town through the mountains to a dungeon, only to go from the dungeon back through the mountains just to go to the city, and then from the city back through the mountains to the town. Then you go on a little boat adventure, which is quite cool, only to return to the town to go back through the mountains and back into the city. End of Disc 2. All the while fighting monsters that you far surpassed in terms of strength, so there isn't really any challenge to it either. It's one of those design choices that really makes me wonder why there aren't any more JRPGs implementing an Earthbound style auto battle thingy, because that really would have made the backtracking a lot less of a thing. Oh, and Disc 4 just really needs to ease up on the fuck you new villain plot twists and the lazily designed teleporter dungeons that just go on and 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 on. But none of that ever ruined the game for me at all. I would have liked it not to be there, sure, but it's also just kind of a sign of the times and an issue that I have with many other JRPGs as well, so you can dismiss this if you want. In any case, yeah, while Legend of the Dragoon definitely has some problems, it is still quite the fun JRPG adventure to go on. Not sure if I'd necessarily call the game underrated per se, as its fanbase has certainly grown quite substantially over time, and rightfully so, but if you really like them JRPGs, whether if it's the Mega 10 series, the Tales games, or Final Fantasy, I would recommend giving it a go. I mean, mechanically, it does a ton of other things that not many other JRPGs do, and while the story is a bit of a mess at times, its characters, presentation, and atmosphere do more than enough to tie it all together. Oh, and yeah, this was indeed a rewrite of an older video. I made more or less the same points initially, but forgot to counterbalance them with some positives and ended up coming across as a bit hostile and cocky as a result. As someone who prides himself in at least being a bit better than the major gaming outlets in terms of structuring my critiques, that was a massive cock-up on my part, even though it was years ago, and I wouldn't want to let that stand. And I also sounded like a bit of a dead person, which probably didn't help my case.